Hello and welcome to this very short revision session on the importance of case studies. So this session really is going to take 5 to 10 minutes of your time maximum to explain to you why case studies are used in geography and the importance of them for you in the context of your exam, but also to help show your understanding in an exam. And I'm also going to provide you with a one-page summary of all the main case studies that you will need to revise for when it comes to completing your geography assessments. So, importance of case studies. We'll kick off with why they're important for an exam, because that's really why you're watching this tutorial. Case study detail and the use of case study detail, so specific facts or figures, can often be something which gets you additional marks in an exam question. Not every single question is going to require you to use case study detail. In fact, the vast majority won't, but there are a few where it could be useful. First and foremost, in 8-mark questions, particularly in a topic which will rely on a case study to ask you the 8-mark question. So for example, if you're looking at development, an 8-mark question is very, very likely to focus on India, for example, because India is the majority case study that people will use across all centres for the development topic. As a result, it won't necessarily say India in the question title, but it will expect you to talk about India in your answer. And if you're talking about India, you need to talk about India specifically. You can't just say India has air pollution. You'd need to say something like, in 2014, 13 of the world's top 20 polluted cities were in India. Okay, in a study by the World Health Organization. So that's the difference. You need to use specific information. And in those 8-mark questions, they're going to require that information for you to get 6, 7, 8 marks out of 8. And the top candidates will regularly quote specific detail, not loads of it. You don't need to write an entire fact file, but will quote lots of detail in their answer or as part of their paragraphs to enhance them. So if I've taught you in lessons before about structuring 8-mark assessment questions, there's always that last little bit where you need to include a specific bit of information as evidence. And in the case of case studies, that is about a place. The other questions that it could appear is actually not just in 8-mark questions. You could get 3 or 4-mark questions that can give you an extra mark by using exemplification, and that's really what that means is a stat or a fact or a figure from a case study you've studied. So it might be an explain question that says explain one impact of rapid development, and we'll stick with the air pollution one that I've mentioned. So explain one impact of rapid development. And you can identify one impact of rapid development is air pollution. That would be worth a mark. Then you could talk about how rapid development creates air pollution. That's a second mark. And if it's worth 3 marks, you could then give an example of a place like India that has lots of air pollution. For example, in India, 13 of the world's top 20 polluted cities are found there. 2014 study by the World Health Organization. So that exemplification gets you a 3rd mark. And in some cases, you'll get questions that ask you to explain one for 4 marks. And in that case, exemplification really is the only way you're probably going to reach 4 marks out of 4, which the top candidates will do. So that's from an examination perspective, why case study detail is important. From a geography teacher's perspective and your understanding, case studies are absolutely critical to help us show you the things we're talking about. So when we're giving you a concept or an idea, if we can show you a place that has experienced that, and we can often show you a video that shows it, or we can show you an image that you can identify with, then it brings it to life really, and it helps your understanding quite a lot. So it doesn't mean you need to know every single fact and figure about a place. Just knowing that place and being able to see what's happened in that place will help your understanding in terms of the stuff that we teach you and how to apply it. If we're looking at the weather hazards and climate change topic, it really helps to look at the impact that Hurricane Sandy had on New York City from the video, or it helps you to look at some of the images after the aftermath of Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. Because we don't suffer with tropical cyclones in the UK, so it's harder for us to relate those concepts and just the damage that's done. We see bad flooding on occasion, but it's nothing like the same level of damage that you get from a hurricane system. So showing you those videos and those images from a case study perspective really helps you visualize what we're talking about. Now, some questions we've mentioned will specifically ask you to name a case study, like the 8 markers. But things you need to remember about case studies, they are often, and almost always, but I'll show you in summary here a second, divided into either developed or developing/emerging. Developed means wealthy, rich, like the UK, like the USA, places like that, like Germany we use. Developing or emerging are countries like Mexico City, or sorry, cities like Mexico City and Mexico, India for the development topic, China for the energy topic. So they often kind of give you one of each, and the reason is you might need to compare aspects of each of those. So what are the differences maybe between the damage to infrastructure between the Philippines and New York City after their respective tropical cyclones, for example. With a case study question that asks you a specific bit of information about a case study question, never be generic. Never just think that saying India or Norwich is enough. You need to use specific information from that case study, and that's normally a number or a place or the name of a project. And if you honestly can't remember case study information or what case studies to use, hopefully at least you'll know the difference between developed and developing, and just go with something. Use what you know. All right, use your local knowledge. If it's developed, you're lucky because you can probably use Norwich or you can probably use London. If it's a developing country, you might need to use maybe you can only remember stuff about Mexico City, but there are lots of crossovers between the effects of rapid development, for example, in Mexico City that you will study in the proper case study for that, which would be India. So if you can only remember Mexico City, you can still get some marks from using Mexico City in your answer if, for whatever reason, India's gone out of your head. It's not as good as having India because it doesn't focus in on development particularly, but there are still parts where there's crossover. So try and use what you know if you are struggling a bit. So this is the final slide of this session really, which is just a nice one-page summary of the case studies that you're going to encounter across papers 1 and 2. So paper 3 is slightly different because it's very much focused on fieldwork that you've carried out in and around Norfolk. So either the Swannington Beck River case study, or a study that we used, or looking at Norwich, or it might have been Hunstanton. But we will basically pick those for you when it comes to doing your fieldwork. For paper 1, for the topics you cover, changing UK landscapes, the case studies we look at are for coasts. We look at the Holderness case study in terms of how it's eroding, what are the factors that affect erosion, for example, and the River Dee. Okay, what are the factors affecting the River Dee and how it's changed over the years? So for coast it's Holderness, for rivers it's River Dee. These haven't appeared in lots of cases, to be honest with you. In past papers they haven't really focused on either of these. Now that's not to say they won't. In fact, it probably increases the likelihood that they will, because they both are mentioned in the specification, but they're also mentioned in the textbook and in the revision guides. So the fact they haven't yet really appeared in any significant context in the first topic of paper 1 tells you that they could well appear soon. The case studies for weather hazards and climate change are actually probably where you're going to find the most information, because we look at 2 types of weather hazard. We look at drought and we look at tropical cyclones. And for each of those 2 types of weather hazard, you need a developed case study and a developing or emerging case study. So in the case of tropical cyclones, we use Hurricane Sandy for our developed case study, and Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines for our developing or emerging case study. And for drought, we use California versus Ethiopia. Okay. For ecosystems, again, there are 2. One is that refers to a temperate deciduous woodland, and we use the New Forest in the UK for that. And the other one is the Amazon rainforest in South America, which is a tropical rainforest case study. Changing cities, so paper 2, there's often a lot more focus, actually, despite the fact that there seems to be more on paper 1, there's a lot more focus on case studies in questions for exams on the paper 2 questions that we've had so far. So for changing cities, it's Norwich for you guys, which is our developed country city, and Mexico City for our developing or emerging city. Now, the revision guide and Seneca and stuff will all use Mexico City. Most of the others will use Birmingham. We use Norwich because you guys know Norwich, so it's easier for you to visualise the things there. When it comes to development, really, India is your main case study. when we're talking about development, we're only really referring to developing or emerging countries. We don't necessarily spend much time, other than the first part of the topic, looking at places that have already developed to quite a high degree, like the UK. However, there are still a couple of references that might be useful for you to know, because we look at top-down development and we look at bottom-up development. And if you get a question that's, explain top-down development, bottom-up development, you want to include some specific detail. The Three Gorges Dam in China has loads for top-down development, and the water aid projects we looked at in Tanzania have quite a lot for bottom-up development. This is another example where Mexico City could be useful to you, because Mexico City also uses bottom-up and top-down projects to try and resolve some of the problems associated with its rapid urbanization. And again, there's crossover there. And the resources and energy resource management section, there are again quite a few little things that we refer to, things like Woking City Council and stuff like that. But the only really significant case studies that we use are to do with how two different countries manage their energy resources. So China is our developing and emerging country version of that, and Germany and Energiewende is our developed country case study for that. Okay, so here you go. Here's the one-page summary of all those really important sort of case studies with regards to your examinations. And if you want to focus any time on revising some of them, I would say this is your kind of minimum list that you need to be focusing on. All right, that summarises the importance of case studies. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time for another session.